Welcome, everyone. Good evening on this slightly warmer evening. Quite a mess. Yes, thank you. Welcome. My name is Joanna Campbell, and I'm the Director of Education Programs for the Wilderness Institute here at the University of Montana, which is part of the Franke College of Forestry and Conservation. If you are a first-time visitor here, this is the Wilderness Issues Lecture Series. This year's theme is titled Wild Hope, Fearless Risk Takers, Art Makers, and Storytellers on the Wilderness and Conservation Frontlines. We've been exploring the myriad ways people of different wilderness and conservation backgrounds navigate challenging and difficult times. So just as a friendly reminder for those of you who are taking the course for credit, I have papers that I will be giving back to you at the end of class, and I will collect your papers from last week's lecture. Also, thank you to MCAT for being here this evening for recording the lecture. Next week, I invite you to attend the 5th installment of the series with Bishop Greg Rickel from the Diocese of Olympia in Washington. His talk is titled Faith on the Front Lines, and he will be discussing the role that faith communities play in conservation and the protection of wild places. So please join us next week. Tonight, we have Julie Cajun. Julie writes, I am the sum of many stories from many places. My mother was Salish, Nez Perce, and Scots-Irish. My father was Chippewa and French. These different stories and places all occupy memory and space inside me. But the largest part of my identity is Salish, and it is my Salish homeland that holds my affection. It is the land that I know intimately. Sometimes in life we are fortunate to find our path. Some would say our destiny. I feel that blessing in my life. I have been able to serve my community as a teacher and school administrator. I've worked for my tribe as a curriculum specialist and at our tribal college as adjunct faculty. Building on the activism and work of generations of Indian people, I have been able to produce tribal history materials in film, text, multimedia, and theater. In my personal life, I am a mother and a yaya, a grandmother, of 3 remarkable boys. I have 5 sisters and still live in the homeland of my Salish relatives and ancestors, in the landscape that has cared for me all my life. Thank you for Julie for being here. Let's welcome Julie Cajun.
Thank you for coming out, and we were looking at that title, Obligate Mutualist, so I want to qualify that I am not a scientist. I am not a wildlife biologist or a scientist by nature, but I am an educator. And so I come into the conservation world really through who I am. I think that, you know, we can all agree that the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, the one thing that we're really good at now, a long time ago we were good at everything. We're not so good at everything anymore, but the one thing we're really good at is conservation work. And that work has gained the tribe international attention. And because of that international attention, tribal members were present at conservation conversations where you had federal agency people and a lot of NGOs and people who had deep pockets who were wanting to give to conservation efforts. And so at those meetings in Washington, D.C. were some tribal members from home. And these tribal members looked around and they said, wow, we are the only indigenous people here. And a lot of the places that you're talking about protecting have a deep connection to us. some of these places are actually in either our Aboriginal territory or currently in our reservation lands. And so because of that conversation, one person at that meeting, Vance Martin, who is the president of the Wild Foundation, he really took that to heart. And the Wild Foundation sponsors the World Wilderness Congress around every 4 to 5 years. I don't know if has anyone ever been to one of those events? Oh, there we go. Okay. So Vance took that to heart, and he said, well, we need to change this conversation. And I think that, you know, if you look around the world and you look at places where there is any biodiversity left or places that are being protected, there's often the presence of Indigenous people. And so certainly an Indigenous voice needs to be more heard in the mainstream conservation dialogue, because we've primarily been absent from that. Now, how I got involved in that was actually through a wildlife biologist who works in my home community, David Rockwell, who I have an enormous amount of respect and admiration for. He's done remarkable collaborative work with our tribe, with our Natural Resource Department, which is our largest department. And he was asked to get together this group of Indigenous land managers in Alaska. And he said, you know, you probably should have an Indigenous person doing that. And so he asked me he said, could you do that? Well, I'm a teacher and an educator, and so I do that. I can bring people together for conversation, because I do that all the time. And so I had the privilege of convening the first Native Lands Council in Alaska. And, you know, in a little bit in my bio, I talked about fate and destiny. You know, by fate, I am who I am. But by destiny, I get to do this remarkable work. And I think everybody in here, you know, by fate, you are who you are in your family, you know, with your color hair, etc., curls or not. But by your destiny, that is if you are open when something comes by and you step out. And sometimes what asks you to step out is new or different. And so I have had the opportunity to do that. And so I think that sometimes we choose our destiny, and that requires that we're ready and that we're open to doing something. And sometimes that's hard, but sometimes it's easy and lovely, and it was like that for me. And so I got to meet Megaron, who's one of the principal chiefs of the Kayapo, one of the Kayapo villages in Brazil, which was probably my most profound interaction I had when I was up there. And I mean, there were many, but so, and then I got to take all the papers from these people and produce a book that was at that first convening, and then we met again in Mexico. And the remarkable thing was, here are all these people doing really remarkable work with very little resource. And then if you think of all the money in the conservation NGOs and community, there's a lot of money going around. And so we convened in Mexico and then again in Spain. We were going to convene in China, and wow, we've got President Trump. So I'm just saying it. So what do you think happened? So Vance Martin has been in China for the past number of years working with government agencies and people and talking about wilderness. And China is actually mapping, you know, the country to look at places for conservation. They're doing some remarkable work. And so there's so much going on in the world that we don't know about. You know, we hear a small piece of mainstream, but it doesn't look like we're going to be in China this year. And so I'm not sure what's going to happen. But through all of that, you know, me being an organizer and a teacher type, I got to meet all these really remarkable people. And that is how I got drawn into the world of conservation and listening to people's stories and thinking about that. We met 2 years ago with a group of conservation people in Washington, D.C. for a new initiative that came out of really, I think, Mexico, when Herb Norwegian, he was the chief of the Decho tribe at that time, said nature needs half. And I don't know quite how he said it, but he said it in his talk with the other land managers. And so that kind of caught on. And so there's a new initiative called Nature Needs Half. And it's trying to put forth the idea that half of the world, you know, the marine world and the terrestrial world, needs to be in conservation status, needs to be protected. If human beings, if we are going to continue on. Now, we can ruin a lot of things and die off, and then hopefully the planet would heal itself and get better and be fine without us. But if we want to remain living on this marvelous planet, we know that we have to start doing conservation very differently. You know, we can't have islands and little sanctuaries. We know that we need complete corridors that are protected. And you can put it in very scientific terms and say, we need the oceans and the lands to be protected to provide us ecosystem services like clean air and water and food. And so they're trying to get this initiative going through a number of, they're going around and filming what are people doing. The NGO Resolve did a paper called An Ecoregion Approach to Conservation. Google worked with them and they've mapped the whole planet. And there are interactive maps that you can look at and look at where are healthy communities of biodiversity in the world, where are they at? And so there are color codes so you can really get an idea of the state of the whole world. And we spent a couple hours, you know, just playing with it and looking at it. So they're trying to promote this through, you know, you market and brand things. It's almost like, it's advertising, right? And so I just was reading a thread of a conversation where some people are saying, well, we thought that we were putting the global deal for nature out there. And then someone said, well, it was something 200. And it's like, well, I don't care what we call it. You know, I just think we need to do it. And we need to bring more people into the conversation. Now, how many of you are students or college students? Okay. Okay, so some of you are here because you have to be here. Is that right? No. Or how many of you are here because you want to be here? And I mean not to hear me, but just because you care, okay? I'm really putting you guys on the spot, right? Well, I want to have a conversation with you. So, in our community, our language is we're kind of adapting some of our language to English. So we go into a meeting and we say, Ches Julu, you know, good evening. Was that common in our, did we say good evening to each other? No, we did not. We said, Stem Tlu As Bu'us, what's in your heart? That was our traditional greeting. So a very different way of greeting someone, you know. So I would extend that to you. What is in your heart? And probably everybody here, in your heart is a concern for this beautiful, remarkable, miraculous place that we live. That's probably why all of you are here. And I know that there is something else in your heart. So I know something about you that maybe you don't think I know. I believe in everybody's heart there is a gift that is singly yours to give to the world in exactly this time. And I believe that at a cellular level. And so for me, my involvement with, I'm on the Nature Needs Half steering committee now. I don't really know what that means. I'm thinking, does that mean I have like some power? Can I get some cash and do a project? So right away, I said, okay, I'm on the steering committee, I have a project. I said, I want to start producing some books for children. Because often in all of this work, we're leaving out young people. And I'm telling you, my ability to imagine and to be creative has been greatly diminished in the past 30 or 40 years. I think when I was younger, I was much more imaginative and I was much more creative than I am now. And I think the gift of youth besides the individual gifts all of you have in your heart, something unique and specific. Because you were born in this moment for this time, I believe that. I absolutely believe that. And you have something to give, but how does that become realized? And so I think that our education system is pretty sad. I've been a classroom teacher and worked in public schools for 9 years. We just had a summit where we looked at data, non-Indian students, Indian students. You know, it's like, well, what the heck? You know, look at these intelligent young women. All these intelligent kids that I know and interact with. You know, why? You know, schools are failing our kids, and they're failing us in what we need. In what we need right now, and the kind of human beings that an educational system should be producing, and the kind of human beings that our traditional education system used to produce. Human beings who had a very strong sense of identity, who had an intimate knowledge and understanding of the place where they lived and knew how to survive on it in a sustainable way, who were responsible, who knew that they had a generational responsibility. And that's something that as a member of the Salish tribe, that's what being an Indian means to me. The privilege of belonging and living in the place is that I have a generational responsibility to do something, for heaven's sake, to contribute something with whatever gift that I have, no matter how small or how obscure or whatever I think it is mine to bring forth into the world. And I think that's what our educational systems should be doing. For God's sake, I hope that that's happening here. Is there freedom for that to happen here? At an institution of higher learning. That's what we call college and universities. Shouldn't there be imagination and creativity and a little bit of freedom and some philosophical conversations about, you know, why am I here, and what is the meaning of life, and what are the greatest challenges facing humanity in the world right now? You know, we all know what they are. And so my pitch to these folks is I want to produce some books for children, because I think children, young people, have the ability to imagine and they have the ability to create. But I think that we're missing whole generations. If we had started this education of young people, you know, I might be a different person. I don't know. Maybe I would have been a scientist. I don't know. You know, maybe I would be doing something different. But I really believe that. And so my goal is to teach kind of in the way that we used to traditionally. And it isn't to say that, you know, and some people say, well, indigenous people have folk knowledge. No, indigenous people are actual real scientists. Sometimes we just have a way of explaining things or talking about things or teaching things. And so my idea is to try to capture the imagination of young people into thinking about the natural world in a different way. And so starting with a story and then teaching from that place, which is, you know, we come into the world, every one of us, and we're all wired for a story, aren't we? From the time we're little. Stories are how we make meaning of life. And so it seems like when I was a teacher, it was natural for me to use a story to teach. And so before I tell the story, to get to this, the title of the talk, I would ask all of you to do something. And you might think, oh, I don't know, I don't want to do it, but maybe you will, I don't know. It always surprises me when people go along with me and they actually do what I ask. So, you know, as a teacher, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I would ask all of you right now, not, you know, just to think quietly about what gives your life meaning. You know, what gives your life meaning? and kind of make a mental list and just think about it for a moment. What gives your life meaning? Of course, I would say my children, my grandchildren, love, young people, justice, rivers, mountains, the spirit world, sisters, chickadees, ladybugs, friends, trumpeter swans. Wow! I mean, come on! I was sitting at the bison range last summer, and we have reintroduced trumpeter swans at home. And I'm telling you, if you want a spiritual experience, have a pair of trumpeter swans fly over your head. I mean, if it doesn't bring you to weeping or to joy, then you need to go on a retreat or something. So, hold the treasures of the meaning of your lives. Hold them for a moment while I tell you a story. The Creator placed the trees high up on the mountain. As the wind blew, they began to sing their song. Their song traveled over the land on the current of the wind. They sang true and clear, hoping to be heard. How long they sang that first day is not known. But they did not stop until the wind left at dusk. The sun rose over the mountain in a still and calm morning. In the quiet, the trees strained to hear that promised sound. Nothing. They waited. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, a small sound came. Oh, it was a light breeze that grew and rose up to the trees. Once again, they sang their song. They sang full, long notes. The breeze remained with them well into the night as they continued to sing, and their voices gave way just before the dawn. Morning brought cloud and shadow and a fierce wind. The trees lifted up their song, pure and strong. It traveled swiftly with the wind, up and over rocky peaks and spires, down forested slopes, until it rested on the valley floor. Night came, and the song faded. Days passed. Nights brought moonlight, and then darkness. Winds came and went. Winter set in and brought a cold gust that caught the tree's song, swirling it round and round their heads. A single tree twisted above the others. To release the song above the hands of the cold gust, the song went out into the air. The other trees listened with all of their being. Only the creak of tired limbs could be heard. Mornings came and went. Springs returned and departed for summers. Winter brought the cold gust with its gripping hands, catching everything in its grasp. And still, the trees sang. They counted years in rings and decades around each other. A spring sun brought unusual warmth. Snow melted on tired limbs, and they raised them in celebration and caught one another in embrace. They lifted their song with the spring wind, renewed with the hope of their promise. They listened, and they waited. She had gone ahead of the others, the naysayers and the doubters. They lingered behind, some content with a simple melody and the assurance of an easy meal. But she kept going, the Creator's words a fervor in her heart. Night drew around her, and she found a quiet resting place. Sleep settled upon her, and she dreamed, and while dreaming, the song came. The song lingered with the dawn, even as she was fully awake. How could this be? She listened. It was coming from the mountains to the east. She set out with a quick beating heart. Up and up she flew, past the tree line, to bleak patches of rock and stone. She wondered how the singers could be living in such a place. She stopped atop a boulder and tilted her head to catch the direction of the song again. Yes, she must keep going up. Over a small rise, she saw a twisted thing. A beautiful carved trunk stood like a sentinel in the grove, and it was singing. It was singing the song from her dreams. She flew to the twisted tree, and it caught her gently in its branches. They had found each other at last. She would have the sustenance she dreamed of, and the singers, the trees, they would have their children. They would live on. So this, of course, is the story of obligate mutualists. You knew that, right? It's like, that's where she's going. The story of soulmates, but perhaps told in a different way. I don't know how many of you have had the good fortune to see white bark pine. Probably some of you have. White bark pine, and I'm sure there's somebody in the audience that knows more about this than I do, is really quite a remarkable tree. And it can grow in very poor soil. It can tolerate drought. It can grow at very high elevations. And it does all of these amazing things. You know, it creates cover for animals, but the cones are exponentially nutritious to other cones. They have so much fat and protein in them. So number one, it gives this remarkable gift of food, but it does these other things. It's a nursery tree. It creates space for other plants to grow. So it literally creates a living nursery. Because of all these remarkable things it does, they call it a keystone species. And so it is so important to so many other things for survival. It does so many other things for others. It lives out the meaning of its life as if the world depended on it. And some parts of the world actually do depend upon it. Squirrels take the cones and hide them in their little middens, and then grizzly bears come and eat them whole. They're carved by wind. Some of them, I've seen photographs where they look like, I just went on the internet and stole everyone's photographs, but it's almost like a conifer bonsai. They're very, very, very beautiful and remarkable. They're called pioneer species, growing in disturbed areas, and they're beautiful. And they have a lovely relationship. They are soulmates with this bird, who everybody knows is Clark's nutcracker. Right. And look how beautiful they are. I mean, look at this beautiful. I don't know how stingy they are with their feathers. I collect feathers. Whenever I see a feather, I collect it and try to identify it. But I would love to find some of their feathers. So they have this lovely relationship with this bird. And this bird does something lovely for the tree. For one thing, they have a beak made for their cone. And there's a name for the cones, and I'd probably say it wrong, but they don't open when they dry. And the seeds don't have wings, and so they can't be spread by the wind. So, and the nutcracker, as you know, has this remarkable little pouch in its throat, and so it can gather all of these seeds, and then it goes and caches them in spots, and has, they say, can remember them for maybe, I don't know, 6 months, so many months. They look at the geography and remember where they've stored all these seeds. But the seeds that they don't eat become seedlings. So these soulmates literally depend on each other to survive. So without this small bird, the tree can't propagate itself. I don't know about you, but I just think this is like the most fabulous love story. And there are all these remarkable lessons in this story. And so I could bring these slides to a classroom and talk to kids about mutualism and introduce a lot of vocabulary and then use that word, you know, that for the cone or the fruit that won't open, that I can't say very well, so I'm not going to say it. But I could do all the vocabulary work and bring this into a classroom, you know, and talk about the size of the bird, you know, well, it's between a robin and a crow, and, you know, it's kind of the size of a jay, and look at the markings, and do all of this, and I'm not sure what they would remember or how meaningful it would be to them. And that's why I created that story. That's not a traditional Salish story, so that is not a coyote story or a traditional Salish story. I'm looking at the camera. It's a story that I crafted for you on Saturday and Sunday because my poet-writer colleague failed to come forth with a story, so I was forced to try to craft it for you. And I'm telling you, creative writing is not my strong suit. I write a lot of nonfiction, educational policy and theory and stuff like that. That's kind of boring. But I wanted to give you an example about meaning, because honestly, I'm desperate for it everywhere I go, in my work, with friends, with family, with things I do with young people. And every time I'm with a group of young people, that's what they want to talk about. They want to talk about things that are meaningful to them, and they want to talk about the meanings of their lives, and they want to talk about things that are bigger than them in the world that they can become a part of, that they can belong to, and things that they can do because they're looking for this. So this is my pitch. Maybe I could get all of you guys to sign a petition and I'll send it to the Nature Needs Half Committee, is that we really look at, and if any of you are creative writers and want to work with me on this project, feel free to get in touch with me. My contact information is available. So I have some people who said they wanted to work with me, and I have a native artist at home that I work with who does a lot of the illustrations for books. But I think we have to start thinking about how we have conversations about this work, and how we have conversations about what is all of our challenge that we share, you know, which is climate change. You know, it's everybody's issue because we're all in it, whether we want to be or not, and we all have something to contribute to it. And so I just believe that if, you know, what if we had an education with young children, at least part of the day, where they were able to be imaginative and they were able to be creative, and they listened to stories that had meaning, but that had real relevance to their life. You know, this bird and this tree has relevance to my life. You know, the decline of this tree is going to impact the grizzly bear population. I mean, you know, we understand how interconnected things are, right? Probably everybody in this room, you've all had that over and over, interdependence and how we all depend on each other. But I don't know that if we've necessarily applied that learning to our own lives as human beings, because somehow we've taken ourselves out of the equation. And we talk about the natural world and humanity. And maybe that's because humans are acting so unnaturally. No, I don't know. But somehow we have to bring these conversations, I think, to young people in a way that they can connect to and to relate to and engage young people in this work. And that is what I want to do with very young children to high school students. We have a group at home that are working with Mike Durgalo, who wrote our climate change plan policy for the tribe, and it was a rough one, and he's revisiting it and rewriting it. But he has a group of young people who want something to do. And so we need to figure out ways to engage each other intergenerationally. That is how we used to exist in our community. We didn't segregate elders. We didn't segregate children, you know, because we are also interdependent and we need each other. And so there are so many lessons that I could tell kids, that kids would glean from this one little simple story that I could talk about. And then I could talk about mutualism, and then maybe I could teach several other examples of it. But if I did it in this way, maybe they might remember. Or maybe it would sink somewhere and have something meaningful to them instead of like, oh, I just went to science class and we learned about a bird in a tree and the bird eats the seeds and makes some trees grow, and, you know, it was kind of cool. You know, but if they can apply that to their life, to where they have real meaning, that is what I'm interested in doing with whatever years I have left on this planet. Because young people make me feel hopeful. And not that older people aren't great too. We're awesome! No. But I don't know, I just feel like everybody is so disconnected and kind of working in isolation in their little, in their categories or their areas. And so if any of you are in, you know, this work, if you're involved in wilderness studies or if you're involved in conservation work, you know, apply it to your own life, please. And remember that we are the natural world, human beings, and we are interdependent on one another. And so we have to work together. So I would ask you, and I don't, you know, I'll ask you something again, and you can do it or not. In the beginning, I asked you to talk about, or to think about, I didn't ask you to talk about, I guess I asked you to talk about what gives your life meaning. And so I'm going to ask you to do something kind of courageous and to talk to somebody else just for a minute about what you said, because I think it's important. And just for a minute, and some of you are sitting with friends, so it won't be hard. You guys could talk to each other. So would you do that for just a minute? And then I'm going to ask you to share some of those with me, and then hopefully we'll have a conversation. So just for a minute. Okay. Is anybody willing to, is anybody feeling courageous enough to share with everybody else? Oh no! Now she's really putting us on the spot. No. I just heard some kind of remarkable things that were remarkable to me. I think that would, if anybody else is, anybody willing to?
First off, I said Jesus.
Okay.
Jesus quick. Then we have like experiences and making people happy and seeing them smile and like just seeing people being happy and kind to others.
Cool.
And yeah.
Giving other people joy. Wow, that's very profound. Thank you. You're brave. Anybody, any other brave soul? Wow.
Give her a go.
Pardon me?
I said I'll give her a go.
Okay.
In no particular order.
Okay.
Squirrels, trees, friends, family, people who care too much, and comedy.
Comedy. Humor is sacred. I believe that humor is healing and sacred and important. Good for you. Anybody else feeling brave and courageous? We're talking about, for the newcomer, who I know, Linda, what gives our life meaning? What gives our life meaning? So, anybody else? Wow, I can't believe this. Yes?
Hunting for food, foraging for food.
Foraging for food.
Loved ones, people who love you.
Yeah.
Wind.
How about a meal with really awesome people? How many of you have meals with really awesome people?
I would say doing creative things with people. I say that just because I was part of the Sayariwa sale last Saturday. That was the most joyous time I've had in a long time. It was honoring the trees, and everyone was dressed in costumes. It was such a wonderful joy.
Okay, so everybody else is going to be quiet, huh? Okay, go ahead.
I would say that I'm really pleased that I'm still right on the planet, and that I love my family so much, and I'm so proud of Julie and her accomplishments. And
This is my sister.
I'm a great role model for these two. My granddaughters that are dancers, and we put them on the floor when they're just able to walk. And that's such a joyous thing to watch, to be a part of dance and music and poetry.
And that helps give meaning to life. Yes, what would we do without poetry? Okay, we were talking about Mary Oliver and sharing our favorite Mary Oliver poems.
Just being sensitive.
So, really, I am not going to go on and on about anything else. That was what I wanted to share with you. If anyone, so I'll talk with you later about New York City. But if anybody had any questions, either about Nature Needs Half or the Wild Foundation or anything like that, or anything related to the stories that we have. So the Trumpeter Swans, obviously, are going to be a story. We're also going to do a children's book on how many of you have driven up on the reservation? Probably everybody, right, has driven up through there. And so they've captured all these really remarkable photographs of everything that is using the animal crossings. And the most used, of course, are the ones that we can't see, the tunnels, and so it might be an otter, or it might be a wild turkey, or it might be a bear, or it might be a mountain lion. But all of these animals are using these corridors to travel. And so I just think that's really interesting, and they've captured all this good information, and so we're trying to figure out how would we tell that story to children in a creative way. And so I think we'd probably have to tell it maybe from one of the animals or a couple of the animals. And it's like, how do they know where these crossings are? Are they telling each other, hey, go down there by Grey Wolf Casino? And that landmark. And there's that great crossing, so you don't have to go across the highway. The jump outs that they have, where they have the high 8-foot fence a long way for the deer, are, I don't know about those, and I don't know. I'm going to ask what their how they've studied those, because it just still seems like a lot of deer get caught. If they come out, then they kind of get caught in the highway corridor, and so I don't know if they're telling the fatalities, but those jump outs, and it seems like some of them go right onto the railroad tracks, and I'm not sure about that. But then I'm not, I'm sure the biologists would say, oh, Julie, there's nothing to worry about there. I don't know. It seems kind of worrisome to me. It's right by the railroad tracks. But so I've been visiting with folks about collecting these stories and really just starting with what I know, which is my place, the place where I live. And so beginning with that and telling it in a different way, and then you have the vehicle, the story, to teach the science, so that it stays, so that it lodges somewhere. I think that we start here, I believe, when we're learning something, if we want to really keep it, that it starts here and then goes up here. You don't have to agree with me, you can disagree, but that's what I've come to believe in trying to work with children and be a teacher, which is really trying to be a facilitator of events and happenings. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm not going to make you stay any longer unless you had a question of me or something you wanted to ask. I am going to bless and release you for the evening. So anybody have any questions that I might answer? Don't.
I have a
Okay.
question. I just so appreciate what you've shared tonight about the role of story, and
Mhm.
as an act of pedagogical revolution. That
Yeah.
for those budding
Mhm.
teachers in the room or people who are going to be interacting with students, that what a powerful tool that is in nesting the wisdom and the knowledge and the information in the heart, as you say. It really is, like, I just so appreciate that we come into this world wired for story, and that we are, that we connect with those. It's just so intuitive and so obvious and natural, and for those of us who are in the, in a science tradition, like we certainly are, don't always learn our flora and fauna that way. Maybe we do a little bit in the field, a little bit, but there is a lot of memorization involved, and so I think just as a simple tool for revolution, that I think that's just so cool.
And for understanding something in a different way, Vernon Finley told a traditional story that's actually a traditional story. It's not like the story I told you, which I contrived over the weekend to entertain you and to give you an example and experience of story, which I hope was somewhat meaningful. But he told this really remarkable story of how the Kootenai people got sweetgrass. And I should say Kasanka, because Kootenai is a kind of an anglicized word. So he told the story of these two Kootenai warriors who went to raid the Blackfeet. Sorry for anybody that I might offend. No. But come on, we did that with each other, right? So Leilani is from that community. But and he told all these great lessons, and he said, why is a party of two warriors so powerful? Why not 4? Why not 5? What does it show you about those two warriors that is so powerful? Well, that they're brave and fierce, and they're very good at what they do. Because one person can't go and do something in their culture and tradition and norms and then come back and brag and say, wow, I went over to Leilani's place and took 10 of her horses and got away, and she didn't even, you can't brag about yourself. So they knew that they only needed 2, because one could tell about the other. And so that's the first thing when you start out in the story. And that's where stories are lovely, and you can have the layers of understanding. And so they did a successful raid, and when they came back, when they were coming back with the horses, they were going to camp at a place that they thought was great. There was water, and there was so much grass, for the horses. But one of the men right away, when they got off their horses, he knew that there was something there. that there was a spirit there. And so he just asked the spirit, he said, "Who are you?" And the spirit answered him and said, "I'm your mother's hair." And it was a spirit of the sweetgrass there. And so he learned, the spirit taught him how to pull the sweetgrass. You never cut it, you pull it, and how to braid it, and how to pray, and what each of the 3 braids mean. And while you're braiding it, you pray for each of those 3 things. And that just like when you braid your hair, that when you're braiding your hair, then you do the same thing. You say the same prayer for yourself and your family and your community as you're braiding your hair. And that like the sweetgrass, you never cut your hair unless something in your life happens that will change you forever. And that's why some people cut their hair at home. So, you know, how does that speak to us about a plant? It speaks to us in a very different way. The other thing that Vernon talked about in that story, they also got a song, and he talked about songs. And we believe that before anything was here, when all the spirits were here, that they had songs. And that when you sing those old songs that you're gifted, that aren't composed, that come from the spirit world, that you are connecting yourself back to that time when just the spirits were here. And what a powerful thing that is. So, story, I think that something that is that universal and simple is so powerful and can be transformative. You know, you might think about stories that have been transformative for you, or stories that you share. I think about that as a grandmother. What stories do I want to tell my grandchildren? Because what I tell them is going to shape how they see themselves in the world, their relationship with the world, and their whole worldview is going to be molded by stories and how we help them make meaning of the world. So my question to you is, how are we going to do that with kids, with young people? And honestly, I think that young people are all of our responsibility. They're everybody's responsibility. And if you want to feel hopeful, take a story and go share it with some kids. I bet there's a bunch of them around here. And I bet they'd really appreciate someone like you. You know, especially you young adults, and you guys too, that, you know, I'm kind of older now for young kids. No. I've kind of gone, I'm no longer hip or cool. But look at these young, you know, the young people in here, you really have something to give with your presence, and maybe a meaningful story to you to share. There's a lot of kids in this community that could use you. And remember, like the natural world, we are interdependent on one another, and we need to be more intergenerational. So if you remembered anything of what I shared, I hope that that's what it would be, that you have a gift. I know that you do, and that it's important to the world. And if we could live our lives, the true meaning of our lives, to give that gift as if the world depended on it. I think that what needs to happen could happen. I have to believe it, you know. I have to believe it. And sometimes I give way to forces that are stronger and more powerful than us, which sometimes may come through a story or a song. So thank you, Lam Lam Husukes Kukani. Thank you in Salish and in Kootenai for coming out on this night and listening to someone who's not a scientist talk about obligate mutualists and having faith in me and sticking with me. So thank you, Lam Lam. Thank you. Mm-hmm.